Hello out there. My name is Laolu Akonde, and you are on to Inside Sources. And today, here is my take entitled 2027 between Tinubu, Atiku, Amechi, and Obi. Now, let's start by making two interesting categorical claims and raise one question. These claims, number one, the incumbent president Bola Ahmed Tinubu has 31 state governors with him, but he cannot win the 2027 elections without Nigerians giving him the required substantial support in form of votes. Claim number two, the opposition cannot defeat him without a clear identity of who is the arrowhead that would significantly offer a difference from the incumbent. That's him. Now, number three, which is the question, how would there be such a contest at all if a fairly vibrant opposition platform does not exist? Let's start with the incumbent. The president met recently at the Aso Villa with his henchmen for the 2027 campaign. They were called Renewed Hope Ambassadors. And the main narrative that emerged from that meeting was that the president was actually boasting, as a politician normally do, about how he's not scared by what the opposition people are doing. And he added that during the primary that got me here, it was tough. Now I'm quoting him. During the general election, it was tough. Now that and then he cut off. And the president throws his hands down in a dismissive manner, suggesting that he will overcome the obstacles again. Now, I think the president is right that he managed to scale major obstacles, including people close to the then president, that is the cabal, who worked so hard to stop him in 2022. But the more unrealistic thing that the president said at that meeting, which reveals what he is underestimating, is when he called the members of his Renewed Hope ambassadors, quote unquote, the conscience of the nation. Let's quote the president. Quotation marks. You represent the conscience of a nation that wants to break the shackles of poverty and hopelessness. Quotation hence. To that, I am tempted to riposte and say, Mr. President, for where? Who are the conscience of the nation? I'm not sure that those guys qualify to be described by any stretch of the imagination as the conscience of the nation. And that goes to the point I wish to make, that there is a bit of bubble around Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and there are some ill-advised assumptions that he's making. For instance, it is clear already that while there are 31 of the 36 state governors professing to be supporting the president and his party because they have defected to the ruling APC, the level of discontent across the country today goes way deeper than the professions of those fair weather politicians. So if the president wants to win, he must start really planning to resonate with the Nigerian people and connect in such a way with the real conscience of the average Nigerians, not those well-fed members of the Renewed Hope Ambassadors group. For now, let's talk about the opposition. The first thing is that outrightly disallowing ADC to participate in the 2027 polls with the INEC derecognition of their leadership seems to me as unreasonable and something that cannot be a sustainable option in a multi-party democracy. One of the more prominent opposition potentials is VP Atiku Abubakar. But there are those who say because he is from the north and many northern political elites are disenchanted with the incumbent president, that because of that, VP Atiku has a strong chance, listen carefully to this, my viewers, to rally the North behind himself against President Tinubu. Now, VP Atiku himself has encouraged that perception. In a recent interview, he said, and I quote, "Tell me, which candidate in the North has more political base than I have? You are talking of Tambuwa and Kwakwanso and also the emerging political figures. None of them have gotten the political bloc vote as much as I have." Unquote. Then, former VP Atiku went ahead to say, I quote again, "The North appears to be more politically united now than ever. The majority of the North will always come together, and I am determined to bring them together because that is my political base." Unquote. What former Vice President Atiku is forgetting is that former President Muhammadu Buhari, who is certainly the most popular Nigerian politician from the North since 1999 at least, and who had over 12 million votes in 2003 and another 12 million votes in 2011, still lost to two sitting presidents from the South. Atiku is by no means a Buhari. So there goes his own bubble and the boast. What is true is that there is indeed a serious level of disenchantment against Mr. Tinubu in the North. He will probably still have a good play in that part of the country, except the northern political elite decide to wrap their support, especially in the opposition, around a southern candidate. In my view, that could change the dynamics, because that way there will be two southerners and the votes will split in the south, and in the circumstances, the north becomes the beautiful bride where the winner can be easily determined. Otherwise, if Jonathan and Obasanjo manage to overcome this consistent Buhari bag of 12 million votes and thereabout, repeating the same strategy of uniting the southern majority with the central north, that is north central, in alignment, behind Tinubu, would not be difficult for the president to reenact. However, if ADC manages to pick a Rotimi Amechi or a Peter Obi as their presidential flag bearer and the arrowhead of a unified opposition, then the chances of the opposition could suddenly become brighter. Look at Peter Obi, for instance, a former governor from Anambra who had a very good outing in the 2023 presidential polls, or Rotimi Amechi, who is bringing significant experience from being a speaker, a governor, a federal minister, and the man who ran the 2015 national campaign for Buhari, that was the change campaign, defeating an incumbent. But by insisting on running, former Vice President Atiku is not only likely to waste the chance of the ADC and the chance of the opposition, he is also disregarding the national consensus for rotational presidency. That was how, with all due respect, Vice President Atiku in 2023 took the first step to destroy PDP. Will ADC or the opposition be destroyed also? In conclusion, it is now up to the Supreme Court to save the day and take steps to preserve our democracy in the way the Apex Court manages the cases before it regarding ADC and PDP. Let us encourage our Supremos, as the Supreme Court justices, as a court of policy to do two things on those two cases. Number one, hear them speedily, and I think they have done that, and then hear those cases conclusively. Let them make a conclusive determination. Number two, the other thing we want them to do is for the Supreme Court to use its power and authority to preserve competitive democracy in Nigeria, knowing full well that not once in our political history have we had a walkover presidential election. we shouldn't start now. Be that as it may, the next presidential election is shaping to be far more interesting than that of 2022. And there you have it. Inside Sources will be right back. Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today, I'm leading the show with a conversation on the future of our great country with somebody who believes so much in our country that having distinguished himself in the area of orthopedic surgery, a rarefied field in the United States, decided to come back home to set up practice here. I'd like to welcome, for the first time, to Inside Sources, Dr. Julius Oni, who is a professor from the Johns Hopkins University and a globally acclaimed orthopedic surgeon. Dr. Julius, welcome to Inside Sources.
Thank you so much, sir. I think just the point of correction, I'm actually not at Hopkins anymore, but I was a former associate professor of orthopedic surgery there. But thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks for this
Excellent.
opportunity to join you on this platform.
And thank you so much. I normally start my conversation by asking my guests the question about the future of our country, which is our major theme here on Inside Sources. That if you look at where Nigeria is today, and you want to make some kind of assessment of our trajectory, do you think that we are going in the direction of that great destiny that many of us believe is the purpose and where Nigeria ought to be?
That's a great question, sir. And when in answering that question, what I usually like to do is be forward facing. There's no question that compared to a lot of other countries that started at the same place, 30, 40, 50 years ago, that we are certainly probably not where we should be. There's no questions about that. I don't think that's up for debate. The question is, are we moving forward? I think the answer to that is yes. Question is, are we moving forward fast enough? That is a question that we can debate. And I think a lot of people would argue that we probably may not be. But overall, if there's some forward momentum, and there are people still willing to put their hands together, to work together, to achieve the goal of making this country the great country that it has the great potential to be, then I am all for joining hands with those people in whatever ways that I can to make that happen. And I think at least in my own small field of orthopedic surgery and in my own life as an investor, that's what I've done so far is focus on the things that I can control and leave the rest to God.
Okay, excellent introductory remarks. Let's take up a few things now. In your view, what do you think younger people such as yourself, and younger people such as myself, what do you think we ought to do? How do we, what ought to be our role outside of the political terrain to build
That
this
that is
country?
that is a great question. And it's a question I've pondered on for a long time. So if you just look at the scale of the problem that faces our country and just how incredible they are, from insecurity to economic challenges to some level of significant poverty to lack of access to high quality healthcare in many places,
Mm,
especially in the rural areas, to the quality of education in some parts of the country. And I mean, we could at least we could go on and on,
mm,
about with all of the problems that are facing the country. If you just look at the scale of the problem and ponder over the scale of the problem entirely, you'll be paralyzed. You wouldn't want to do anything because you'd feel like, oh man, there's no way that we are going to be able to get out from underneath this heap of challenges that we are facing.
mm,
However, if each one of us just says, you know what? yes, there are all these problems, but in my own neighborhood, in my own sphere of influence, in my own area of control, in my own job, in my own house, for those things that I can control, for those people that I'm interacting with on a daily basis, for those people that I'm responsible for the people that I'm working with, how am I interacting with them to create a better society? So, and what I'm saying is not just philosophical. I'm talking about, I'll just give you an example. As an orthopedic surgeon, one of the when I was thinking about coming back to Nigeria, everybody was like, "Ah, this is crazy, why would you think about doing that? You're leaving a pretty comfortable academic job and you have the platform at Johns Hopkins, just come and go as necessary." But I had been coming and going for almost 10 years, and I knew that for the problem I was trying to solve, which was improving access to high quality orthopedic surgery care
Mm.
in lower to middle income countries, starting with Nigeria, there was no way to do that effectively except if I was on ground. So I was like, listen, if this is just what I can focus on and solve, I know I may not be able to solve the entire access to, care problem. I may not be able to provide insurance for every single Nigerian. I may not be able to even provide high quality orthopedic surgery to every single Nigerian.
Mm.
But can I provide it for some segment of Nigerians who otherwise would have had to travel to access the same level of care somewhere else? Can I provide it to some Nigerians who may not have had access to this type of care, if I wasn't around? And the answer to that is yes. So I just focused on that, and slowly but surely, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step,
Yeah.
and slowly but surely we are solving that problem, and slowly but surely we are bringing access to access to high quality orthopedic surgery care, access to high quality musculoskeletal care to our people, and nothing gives me much more joy than that.
So, I mean, your story itself is something that is quite inspiring, and I hope we get to it a little bit more detail before we end this conversation. But just to follow up on what you had just said about what people can do you think there is a need for some kind of effort, of a group of Nigerian professionals, especially the young ones, to put their imprint on the political coloration of our country, not just by being politicians, but by getting involved in the electoral process?
So, I mean, I think in any society, you need like every segment of the society certainly be active and engaged in in not just the electoral process but in society building, right? And
Mhm.
in a society like ours where the majority of the people that live in it are young people, I think it's imperative that those young people who are the majority of the population,
Yeah.
that they have somewhat of a say, a significant say in the direction of the society. Having said that, I am not a political scholar or a political expert. I am a world expert at orthopedic surgery, and I will consider myself an expert investor too.
Mhm.
But when it comes to the political matters, I'm a neophyte and I'm a novice, and I would be the first to admit that. But I do think that I'll say this much. The story of us as Nigerians has been that of individual excellence,
Mm.
individual, accomplishments. I mean,
Mhm.
you put Nigerians anywhere in the world, you see them leading, from and it cuts across any
Yeah.
discipline. In medicine, you see Nigerians at the top of all the different hospitals. In law, you see Nigerians, at the top of the best law firms. In engineering, you see the Nigerians right at the top. In administrations, you see the same thing. in accounting. I mean, we can go on and on and on. But what we have not done, and what some other societies have done better than we have, is that as a collective, even in those places that we have been,
Mm,
that we've demonstrated individual excellence, you know, as a collective, we have certainly underperformed. And that is also reflected in some of our underperformance in our country. So
right.
I think there's a fundamental distrust, there's a high cost of transaction between us. And so a lot of that causes us, and some of them for good reasons, right?
Mm,
But a lot of that causes us to not um, 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 do enough with each other. And usually, if you want to go fast, you go by yourself. Or if you want to go far, you want to go wide, you want to create the greatest impact, you got to go with others. And that's one of the things I certainly learned in business. And so I think, be it in business, be it in politics, be it in other endeavors of life, we need to be working more together. We need to be coming together, putting our heads together, brainstorming on the critical ways that we can leapfrog our challenges so that we can truly achieve that potential that we talked about earlier.
excellent, excellent. And this was the reason why I asked you the question of what professionals such as yourself can do as a group. It's important, the issues that you've raised. So let's go ahead to talk about uh, what your own decision meant. So we had a problem of brain drain. So some of those outstanding Nigerians of which you speak, you find them in the United States. I think there was even a time when it was believed that there were more Nigerian doctors in Chicago, I think, you know, than in other places, including the fact that a higher ratio of Nigerians were there, doing excellent work and all over that country. And like you said, in several areas of human endeavor. Now, so that defines the brain drain problem for us, that some of our best are outside. We still have a lot of very great people inside, no doubt about that. But the problem of the brain drain is a real one. Now, you have tried to turn it around by saying that, okay, look, I'm going to go back, and that's some kind of a brain gain, like some other people will say. My question to you is that what has been your experience so far when you made that move? And are you in a position to encourage more of people such as yourself to make a similar move?
That is a great question, sir. I my move to come back was born out of significant conviction. I was born and raised in Nigeria, specifically in Ondo State.
Mm,
And for the first 16, 17 years of my life, I was here. And it wasn't until then that I moved to the US to start college. And so I, a lot of my formative years were spent in this country. And so, in that sense, I'm a true son of the soil. I feel very much at home here. And despite that, I was gone for 25 years, and a lot of my social construction was obviously
mhm.
um, achieved in the US. And my training were all done in the US, at least post high school training. I still felt a very strong pull to this place that I call home.
Mm,
And I can tell you that there are so many other professionals that feel that same fire, albeit it may be very faint, but they feel that same fire
mm,
in their hearts that still burns for Nigeria. And it may not be burning brightly. They
mm,
may be disappointed with the direction of the country in some ways. They may be upset about the fact that they cannot do what they do outside of the country here in Nigeria, but they still have that fire. And every single time when they get to visit Nigeria, that fire burns a little brighter. and they start thinking about, oh man, what are the things that I can do to improve this place? There are thousands and thousands of Nigerians just like that. And so uh, now, a lot of people come to me since I moved back. A lot of people have come to me and say, you know what, I want to make the same move too, and
Mm,
I want to be able to do exactly what you did and set up in Nigeria. And what I usually say is like I encourage it, but I think you need to be thoughtful about the process. I didn't just wake up one day and say I was coming. This was a multi-year, and a very well thought out plan. For almost 10 years, I've been coming in and out of Nigeria multiple times a year, providing services, seeing patients, evaluating, trying to assess the landscape to see, okay, how do I really engage? What's the best way for me to provide some services to the country, to my people? And I've been doing that either through a nonprofit organization or through some institutions, hospitals, private and public that I've engaged with over the years.
mm,
And it's by doing those things that I was able to kind of form my thesis and assumption around what the challenges may be when I came on ground and what the potential benefits could be for myself and the society if I was to come on ground. And ultimately, what really made the journey much easier was that truly I had other sources of income.
mm,
I have a private equity firm that I started with two other gentlemen, where we were able to collaborate with other busy professionals, most of them of Nigerian background,
mm,
and started to buy some apartment buildings in the US. And that really helped to form some type of financial base that made it easier for me to say, you know what, I'm going to go back home. Yes, I'm going to make much less money than what I would have been able to make in the US. Yes, the platform may be smaller than what it could have been in the US. And yes, the challenges may be great, but my 80-year-old self would never regret giving it a shot.
mm,
And the bottom line is I asked myself this question: if at 80 or on my deathbed, if I'm lucky enough to be able to reflect before passing on, if I was to think about it and say, you know what, sh- even if it did not work out, would I have regretted going to Nigeria and giving it a shot?
mm,
The question was very clear to me. The answer was very clear to me that I would rather give it a shot and fail than not try at all and regret it much later on in the future.
mm,
So what I usually say is you have to know who you are. You have to understand what your financial base is. You have to understand what the potential challenges are. That means you've explored and completely understood the landscape that exists locally. And then you have to understand what your niche is and how you can plug into that niche. And given the fact that I've been on ground so far, I actually consider my responsibility to now create somewhat of a platform for others to be able to come in a lot easier. So, in that regard, I've been engaging with many, many stakeholders to find ways to make it easier, much easier for when I was coming, for other folks in multiple specialties to be able to re-engage back, in Nigeria. And there are some projects that I'm working on outside of my practice that is going to facilitate that type of movement for different professionals, not just doctors, physical therapists, nurses, nursing anesthetists, and all the healthcare workers who may have some interest in re-engaging back. And some of them are not going to want to move back entirely
mhm,
for multiple reasons. But even if they're able to engage back in a meaningful way, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks in a year, a combination of those efforts will do a whole lot to transform what our healthcare landscape looks like. And I truly believe that the way out of our this quagmire that we find ourselves in, especially in the healthcare space, is going to require the expertise and the resources of diaspora and healthcare workers combined with the ingenuity and the resourcefulness of our local partners in all strata of healthcare, all working together to create unique solutions that are Nigerian patient focused. I absolutely believe that with all of my heart, and I will continue to work on trying to achieve it.
Quite encouraging to hear those words, Dr. Julius. Now, if I may ask, so since you came in and you set up this practice, how has it been? How has it been basically? How is business doing?
Yeah. So it's been quite difficult. It's a bit of a roller coaster, right?
Mm,
I would tell you that I'm making a much less than I was making in the US. And so from a financial standpoint, it's a bit challenging, at least from the medical from my medical income.
right.
It's quite challenging, right? However, I am the happiest I've ever been professionally.
Mm, look at that.
And there's nothing that beats when you see someone in pain, you see them struggling with a low quality of life, you see them struggling functionally, and you do something for them, or you operate on them, or you give them an injection, or you give them some medication, and all of a sudden a couple of weeks later, a couple of days later, almost immediately sometimes, they get up and they start moving and then they get their life back. They're now able to be more productive. They're re-engaging. Their spirits are high again. And there's nothing like being able to do that, especially doing it for Nigerians right here in Nigeria. And interestingly, we are now like seen people from other places. We've seen patients from Cameroon, from Sierra Leone, from the
Wow.
Gambia, from the UK, from the US. It's fascinating to me to be like, wow, right here in Nigeria, we're seeing patients from all of these different places, and it just warms my heart to see that. So yes, it's been challenging. Yes, there's been some headwinds. Yes. And some of my biggest challenges are access to the highest quality implants, instrumentation, and consumables. That's the bottom line. In the US, I had access to like a plethora of all of these things. I
Mm,
had maybe 10 choices for almost anything that I wanted, right?
yeah.
In Nigeria, if I'm lucky, I have one or two choices for some of these things. And that has been a significant challenge. So a lot of times I've had to either bring things myself, because I refuse to lower the quality of what I do for to meet some local standards. I refuse. So I just what I my promise to my patients is that you're going to get exactly the same thing that my patients will get at Johns Hopkins,
Wow.
and you're going to get the same outcomes. And whatever it takes to get that is what we're going to do.
Interesting.
And so and so that being able keeping that promise to my patients and being able to deliver on those promises to the patients. I mean, we've seen over 1,300 patients, 1,300 patients in the 18, 19 months that I've been around.
Wow.
We've operated in over 160 people, you know? So it's incredible. And we are only just getting started. We just at the beginnings of it. Because now I'm working on a new location in new center, and hopefully that center is going to change the question, the conversation around what healthcare spaces can look like, what healthcare spaces can feel like, what healthcare hospitality feels like in our country, and combine that with still delivering world-class patient outcomes. I think Nigeria is ready for it, and Nigerian patients deserve the best of the best care.
Fantastic. This is quite good music in our ears, Dr. Julius. Now, let me ask you. So, what do you think how do you think the conditions and the environment under which you practice and under which our people access or don't have access to healthcare can be improved. Now, part of my own, I have two important issues, that keeps me awake and interested in this job. Two things. The level of poverty of our people is abysmal. If you look at the numbers of people that are in multidimensional poverty.
Absolutely.
And of course, then there's the problem of corruption,
Hmm.
and in my view, it ties in. It is because of the depth of corruption that you don't have good schools. I mean, you said that you went to primary and secondary school here. I'm sure that if you go back to those schools, you will be shocked at how the thing has become very deteriorating. So people don't have access to public education. People don't have access to good hospitals. Now, so you have come and found a very important niche. But I wanted to ask you, what do you think can get better? And then generally, how, in your own view, can we improve at least healthcare access for our poor people?
Yeah. So that's a great question, and that's the question is $1 million question, and the question that probably will require many, many brains of people smarter than me to come together to solve. But I will give you my perspective. I think for any healthcare for healthcare to improve in any society, you're going to have to figure out a way to improve access to um, healthcare coverage, healthcare insurance coverage to a greater number of people. And that could be a combination of employer coverage with governmental coverage and private sector coverage. But right now, I think insurance coverage in the country is about less than 10% or 10 around 10%.
Mm,
And we're going to have to find unique ways to cover more and more of our population so that more and more people can get access to not just preventative healthcare, but some basic primary, secondary, and potentially tertiary healthcare uh, to be covered under some of these plans. I think that by itself, once you cover more people,
mm,
and obviously that requires resources, requires monies, requires the economy to be doing much better, and for some of the yields from that economy to essentially be invested in healthcare. Um, well, the but ultimately, you need more people covered because when you have more people covered, that's more people that can go to the doctors. That's more people that the doctors can treat, and the doctors are assured that they're going to get paid, right?
mm,
And that then you create a more sustainable healthcare system that way because there's more investment in it. Um, but now the question is, where does the money come from? Well, how do you make sure that the distribution of that healthcare is equitable so that it's not just skewed towards the top
mm,
versus the masses? Those are questions that healthcare policy experts, public health experts can certainly answer.
mhm.
I'm not an expert or qualified in any way, shape, or form to theorize in that. But for me, then that goes back to what I said earlier, that if you look at the scale of the problem, you will be so paralyzed into almost inaction.
Yeah.
And for me, what I've just focused on is, listen, I'm going to do my part in my own small corner of the country, in my own small corner of my specialty, and try to make a difference in whatever ways that I can, not just for the people that can afford it, but in also in many cases for folks who may not be able to afford it. Maybe I can do it at the same scale. Maybe the people who can afford it may pay with some time.
Mm,
And then for those people that can afford it, you take care of them and continue to increase access to care, continue to increase education to others so that others can also go out there and train and do those services So that's why we started the ONI Fellowship, the Orthopedic Nigeria International Fellowship, where we're training other surgeons to essentially go out there and start taking care of other folks too, over time. And my hope is that, in several years from now, we will have many people who have gone through the fellowship and who can now take care of that many more people in society. So
Interesting.
all I can do is focus on my part,
Mhm.
and that's what I would advise, that all we can do for now is focus on our parts to do the best we can, in our own small area of influence, and hopefully advise those people who have the ability to make the decisions in society to to see the value in investing more in healthcare, because a healthy nation is a wealthy nation. And certainly we need to figure out healthcare as much as we're trying to figure out education, as much as we're trying to figure out revenues, and we're trying to stem losses from things like corruption and leakages.
Mm.
We need to figure out how to stay healthy as a society so that we can truly blossom.
Thank you so much for your excellent responses. I guess one last question I would like to uh, ask you is I want you to, speak, you know, and tell us what will you want. I mean, if you had an audience today from the president, what will you say to him regarding some of these issues that we've talked about? What do you consider to be the most important message that somebody such as yourself would like the government of the day, especially the president, to do?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm qualified to speak to the president, but I will give you my feedback on that. I'm just a lowly orthopedic surgeon and an investor, but if I was to say something to the president, to the government in power, I would say, at least with regards to healthcare, I think we need to figure out a way to make it super, super easy for diasporan doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals to come on ground and collaborate with our dynamic, resourceful engineers, local doctors, nurses, physical therapists, and other healthcare workers. That combination needs to be facilitated, uh, either through the private sector, or through government, but certainly government has a role to play in making that facilitation super easy. So those folks in the diaspora needs to be incentivized. There's got to be a way to make it easy for them to. I mean, and this incentive doesn't have to be monetary. It could just be a fantastic platform where it's easy for them to really plug in into the great opportunities to put their skill and resources and expertise to work right on ground. That is the way that other folks have figured it out in other societies.
Mm.
Is the diaspora and experts, the combining forces with the local experts, and in a way that is collaborative and not competitive, in a way that fosters teamwork, in a way that is patient focused, in a way that reduces cost and maximizes value. That is what I think is the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to improving access to high quality health care right here at home in Nigeria.
Right. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Julius Oni. Thank you for the great work that you are doing. I know that orthopedic surgery is one of the more rarefied areas of surgery, and I know that a lot of our people will benefit from your decision, and I'm sure are already benefiting. Thank you for the sacrifice, and thank you for coming to Inside Sources.
Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate the opportunity to come chat with you on your platform. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. And that's a segment. Inside Sources will be right back with a second segment where I'm going to be having a conversation with retired General Atolagbe, who will be telling us a little bit more about what is happening in Plateau, where he had actually worked, and give us some kind of postulations of how to get things better. Inside Sources will be right back. Welcome back to Inside Sources. I want to have a conversation on the recurring situation of insecurity. We're going to be looking at some of the things that had happened specifically in Plateau State. There's a report that we will be considering, a short report of quite a lot of the dimensions of the conflict, including the fact that there have been several commissions of inquiry that were set up with specific recommendations, many of which don't seem to have been implemented. And then, of course, we'll talk generally about the security situation in the country. To join me in that important conversation, I have somebody who is a consultant, a security consultant for ECOWAS and the AU. He was formerly a sector commander of the UNAU Joint Hybrid Force in Darfur. He was also the commander of the Operation Safe Haven Command in Jos, which is now called Operation Enduring Peace. I'd like to welcome back to Inside Sources General Tony Atolagbe. My brother, it's good to see you again.
Good afternoon, and it's nice to be here.
Okay, so I have this report that that you have done about trying to give an understanding of the Plateau State, the Plateau crisis, and you traced it all the way back to as far back as 1994, which was based on this your article, the first time that we had a commission report that is referenced here. And looking through the report, you raised quite a lot of issues that may be a factor in the particularly the Plateau crisis. You talked about political and economic exclusion issues, contestation of ownership of the land, issue of resource competition, farmer-herders conflict, a terminology that was used for a long time, land grabbing accusations, ethno-religious tensions, religious polarization, failure of governance and legal impunity, and then, of course, issues of lack of accountability, the weakness of the security infrastructure, and then, of course, talk about the historical colonial legacy. Now, I want you to just give us a summary. So you have a very broad view of this thing. You served as the sector commander for quite a while, while the Buhari Osinbajo was there. So what is your view about some of the issues that has been properly well understood, reflected in many of the commissions? You listed about 12 or 13 commissions. What's your view about how to turn around to begin to do the things that have been recommended since 1994 to solve this problem?
Thank you very much, and it's nice to be here again. You will notice that that list of inquiries and commissions that are listed before you are just 14.
Yeah.
Up till between, I think, 1994 and 2011.
The last one, you have 2011, yeah.
So you can imagine that, yes, so you can imagine between 2011 and 2026, there could have been another 14, meaning that we could have had like close to 30 inquiries. And we are still seeing that something robust that could actually, give us a clue to solving this problem is still not, is not out there for us to implement. Yes, the kinetic approach is there, but there are still a lot other areas that need to be covered. So you now see a situation, you now see that as of this year, I know that there was another panel led by a colleague of mine, retired Major General Nicholas. Okay, and in which they made some recommendations. But what we have always said is that it's good to carry out such kind of, let me say, an inquiry. But when the recommendations come, you and I know, and you will recall, when you came with the VP to visit when I was there, when we had the crisis.
That was 2018.
What the VP said was that, look, we have some money lying down under a kind of peace building or an arrangement in which people who are in crisis like this, they can be assisted. And he mentioned that the money was up to 6 billion. As at that time, we don't know what it will look like now.
Yeah.
That there are a few states who access this money and they could have used it to support their efforts within the state. What I'm saying is that in Plateau State, we have a peace building agency. They have a kind of write-up in which they have laid out some of the things that they need to do. But do they have the resources to do some of these things? And now you now see, as a follow-up to what the VP had said then, when we had the last crisis now, the president was also kind enough to say, look, I will deploy cameras for you.
Right.
If you
AI cameras.
If you have 5,000 cameras in this conflict area, then I think almost the entire job is solved, because these are some of the things we have been clamoring for, that we need some bird's eye view of the terrain so that we can see what is going on. We can see people moving at night, going to people's houses to go and take them out. You see people going with cutlasses to slash throats and cutting babies and so on. But again, I also know that as at last year, 2025, among the 4 satellites that were suggested or that were programmed by this government, one of them is for security.
Okay.
If we make this satellite to come on board early enough, we may likely do away with cameras, because I mean, a satellite can cover the entire space of Nigeria.
So what you're saying is that the satellite has not been deployed.
It's yet where the extent to which it's. I mean, perhaps they have commenced developing it, but then it's not brought out there for the military to use. I'm aware that between NASDA and the military, there are some exchanges that comes from them to the military to assist them. You understand? Yes, using satellites that we already the existing one, but this particular one is purely meant for military. Because there are some former ones that were deployed in past government.
Right.
Some of them are for communication. Some of them have some eyes to. I mean, they can see, but not clear enough for us to say, okay,
for actionable.
Intelligence. So. But we are saying that with this type of approach now, using technology to deploy around the area, I'm aware there's a little effort by the government to deploy drones. I'm also aware that there are also other drones also that are working within the communities, deployed by federal government. Okay. I was part of those who went to train on the use of those drones. We went last year and we have also gone this year.
Okay.
You understand?
That's the military using the drones.
It's not military. This one is from the VP's office under early warning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have what we call Osprey.
Yeah.
So
I know that office.
Yeah. So you now see how there is need for us to now find a synergy.
But that deployment of drones has not really been applicable because we have not seen its impact.
I mean, especially when people are working at different, the one by the government is being banned by government. The one under the VP's office also they also do their own and feeding back straight to the federal. And from federal, of course, they are exchanging with ECOWAS and the AU at that level. You understand? So
there's no...
that linkage is not established yet. So, but you see, if that linkage is there, it will be like a force multiplier for them, because you now have where 2 drones are working at parallel. They are now having 4 working in synergy. See,
Okay.
so those are some of the areas. But then we are also saying that, look, if you want to deploy technology, you need to employ the right people. You need to employ the right mind, the capacity,
And that's
the
very
professional.
critical.
Yes, those who can. Because now, if you deploy drones, there's supposed to be a linkage between the drones that are deployed and the troops that are on the ground. So that when you notice something,
You can then...
But you can't be operating drones and then collecting information, and then maybe after 2 days, you now make it available to the military, and they tell you that, oh, you saw them. Useful. Oh, okay, but when was this? They say 72 hours ago. I mean, it's of no use, that information. But there's need for what we call like maybe a fusion center in which the information is here. The people to take action are also somewhere. That is, for instance, we know that most of those areas are not accessible by vehicles within Plateau State. Most of the areas are not accessible by vehicles because these guys, they use motorbikes.
And I remember that when you were commander, you came up with the idea of also
these motorbikes
for the troops.
Yes, and then we trained them. We bought new motorcycles.
Do they still have those motorbikes?
I wouldn't know because it depends on the commander on the ground and how seriously they take their jobs. So these bikes, if you have them in teams, you understand now, and we are all connected to the fusion center on radios, we only need to tell you that use the radio with you because there are some radios that can guide you, providing coordinates to where you are supposed to go.
Wow.
You understand now? So these radios, once the other person tells you, is connected to a board that is on top of your bike. You understand now? Right. You just get the information and key it in to the camera on top of your bike. It shows you the location of the coordinates that is given to you.
You get a GPS.
You lead the team and you move. And you are all carrying your radios. You can talk. You can invite the other team that is in the other village to come and link up with you because you have seen movement of some people with guns going to a particular village.
Interesting.
So if this kind of thing is not worked out, it's just needless acquiring things and not making the necessary linkages that are supposed to be there for it to be effective.
And there you have it, another edition of Inside Sources, like where we say Nigeria will prevail. It means Nigeria will win, partly because we will push some of the big issues here. My name is Laolu Akonde. Thank you for watching, and by the grace of God, I'll see you at the next edition.